Hello, my dear students. So, today let's discuss the question and answers from the chapter about my race, a song, which is included in your textbook, Multiple Modernities, Readings on Kerala. First, we will discuss the short answer questions. Then we will discuss the paragraph and the essay questions. So the first short answer question. So you can see when you take your textbook in page number 77, you can see the questions. So the first question is, what does the word in the opening of the poem about my race a song represent? So the answer is, the word in the opening of the poem about my race or song represents aksharam or alphabet, or more precisely language in general. Here it denotes the illiteracy of his race who couldn't write their own history. Now moving on to the second question. Which is the race identified by Poigel Apachan as my race? Answer is, the race identified by Poigel Apachan in the poem About My Race, a Song is the Paraya race or the Paraya community. The Parayas are also known as ancient Dravidans. Third question. How do the histories in this world conceive humanity according to the poet Poigel Apachan? Answer. The histories in this world conceive humanity into two races. The poet might either be referring to the rich and the poor, or be referring to men and women in general. He might even be referring to black and white races, since there are plenty of opportunities to interpret this line. The fourth question. What is the cause for the grief that the poet feels in the poem About My Race, a Song? The poet feels sad when he thinks that there was no one to write about the history of his race. Their life and history are not marked in the mainstream. Fifth question. How does the poet attempt to overcome the feeling of grief in the poem About My Race, a Song? Answer is, the poet attempts to overcome the feeling of grief by writing the history of his race himself. He adds a few notes about his race in his own tunes. Now, the sixth question is, who, according to Poigel Apachan, are the earliest occupants of Kerala? Answer is, according to Poigel Apachan, the earliest occupants of Kerala were the people belonging to his race. He belongs to the Paraya community, who are also now called the ancient Dravidas. Now the seventh question is, what is the poet not ashamed of in the poem About My Race, a Song? The answer is, in About My Race, a Song, the poet is not ashamed to admit the weakness of his race. The poet is not either blind about the ignorance of and the foolishness of his people. Now moving on to the eighth question. What does the word cursed progeny in the poem About My Race, a Song indicate? Answer is, the word cursed progeny in the poem About My Race, a Song indicates the pathetic condition of his people. They were illiterate and they also had many weaknesses. Now the ninth question is, What are the members of the poet's race blamed for in the poem About My Race, a Song? Answer is, the members of the poet's race are blamed for the ignorance and weakness. They were always called the cursed progeny. Now we will move to the essay questions. As I said previously, the paragraph questions, most of the paragraph questions I have included in this essay. Only one paragraph question I couldn't include, that I will be giving after we discuss the essay question. So, not the point. The second paragraph of the essay is the answer of paragraph question 1 from the textbook. The third paragraph of the essay is the answer of paragraph questions 2 and 3 from the textbook. The fourth paragraph of the essay is the answer of paragraph question 4 from the textbook. So the essay questions in your textbook, you can see essay questions in page number 78. The first question is, Poikil Appachan's poem About My Race, a Song is a criticism of written histories. Elucidate. Second question is, Poikil Appachan's poem About My Race, a Song attempts to locate the intricacies of Dalit life in Kerala. Explain. Third question is, how does Poikil Appachan's poem About My Race, a Song represent the people belonging to his race? So the answer is the first paragraph. We will begin with the introduction paragraph. So see, it is often said that the chief obstacle to the progress of the human race is the human race. Racism is the main issue projected by Poikil Appachan, 1879 to 1939, in the poem About My Race, a Song. The poem depicts the pathetic condition of people who belonging to Dalit community. The poem has the honor of being recited by Appachan in the Legislative Assembly of Tiruvidankur. Now moving on to the second paragraph of the essay. So as I said previously, the second paragraph of the essay is the answer of paragraph question number 1 from the textbook. So the paragraph question number 1 is, what is the nature of histories according to Poikil Appachan? So the answer is, people who have no knowledge of their history and origin are like trees without roots. In the poem About My Race, a Song, Poikil Appachan tries to find out the roots of his race in history. The poem is composed to educate his own class of people. He tries to create awareness of the complex life each and every Dalit man faces in his life. He says that history chooses to neglect the people who belong to his community, the pariahs. The histories in this world conceive humanity into two races. The poet might either be referring to the rich and poor or be referring to men and women in general. He might even be referring to the black and white races, since there are plenty of opportunities to interpret his lines. But whatever be the case, the pages recording the culture of his community is not seen anywhere among historical records. So he laments, not a single word about my race is seen. The poem is an outcry against the perennial discrimination and marginalization of his race. Even though they are included in the social order, they are not able to enjoy the fruits of that inclusion. History was always recorded by the rich and the educated, and there had been not a single person to pay attention to his caste. The literate people continued to create a history of their own race. The absence of the valid presence of a written history of the Dalit's life pains the poet. Now moving on to the third paragraph of the essay. So the third paragraph of the essay is answer of paragraph questions 2 and 3 from the textbook. So paragraph question 2 from the textbook is, why was there no one in the ancient world to write the story of the poet's race? Paragraph question 3 is, what is the story that the poet wants to write about? So the answer is, we are made by the story of history. But what if we lacked the right words to tell it? This is what the lament in Pagurp's poem about my race a song. The poet couldn't see any story about his race in history. This prompts him to come up with the idea to write the story of his own race. He writes, let me add in my own tune a few notes. Though belonging to the pariah caste, he is educated and is able to read and write. But this was not the case with the people who came before him in his race. They were ignorant, illiterate people who couldn't reflect on themselves and write anything about their hardships. They lived their lives from hand to mouth without being bothered of the need to record the history of their life for the future generation. Now, such a situation has changed a lot. So now he would love to tell how the ancient people of Kerala came to be regarded as wretched. He is proud of the fact that the land of Kerala rightfully belongs to these aboriginals. But the Aryans subjugated them once they made their entry. The Parians were not allowed to go to schools, and so they remained ignorant. Now we will move on to the fourth paragraph of the essay. So for the fourth paragraph of the essay is answer of paragraph question number 4 from the textbook. So the paragraph question 4 is, why does the poet dismiss any sense of shame associated with the present condition of his race? So the answer is, optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. This lesson is what is taught by Pagurp in the poem About My Race a Song. In the poem, the poet dismisses any sense of shame associated with the present condition of his race. The poet is not ashamed to admit the weakness of his race. He is not either blind about the ignorance and foolishness of his people. This shows his wish to see his community transformed through a positive change. He is critical of their ignorance, which left the history of their race blank. So he doesn't want the same fate grip the future generation as well. He is confident enough to come up with his decision to write down the history of his own race. So he says, I am not ashamed to unveil the weakness of my race. He has learned enough from history that his race has no story to tell to the world. So after understanding that change is the end result of all true learning, he decides to move ahead. So he shamelessly admits that the present condition of his race is pathetic. This act of admitting is done shamelessly, mainly to make his people understand the need to change for the better. Now we will move to the concluding paragraph of the essay. So the conclusion is, the truth about the survival of life is the struggle involved behind its run. The poet wants to make his people conscious about their condition. While analyzing this way, the poem is seen as a maiden attempt by a prolific Dalit writer to improve the condition of the Dalit community. He proclaims to them that we are the change that we seek. So now we have finished the essay and 4 paragraph questions from the textbook. So now there is one more paragraph question. So that question is, how does the poet bring in the concept of divinity or God in the poem? So the answer of that paragraph is, God made the country and man made the town and the ideas of caste and creed. In the poem About My Race, a Song, Poigil Apachan expresses his wish to change the human-made ideas of discriminations on the basis of caste, creed, etc. He says that Dalits are excluded from all the privileges enjoyed by the upper caste people of the society. They have no history but the history of pain and suffering. He asks God for what reason they are to let themselves to be blamed forever. He fears that this blaming will continue without a stop till the end of the world. Here he asks a question. How can God, he who gave shape to all, allow this to go on? He questions the divine judgment and the legal system that is sidelined them. But we see that the poet is not a passive victim asking God to mend the problems for the betterment of his race. He understands that God has given him the gift of life and energy. So he decides to come up with the decision to bring the ray of change. He is a true believer in the God within. This is why he feels that once we focus on being a blessing, God makes sure that we are always blessed in abundance. The kingdom of God will conquer all the horrors, and no evil can resist grace forever. So now we have discussed all the question short answers, paragraphs and essay questions from the poem About My Race, a Song. So in the next class we will come up with a new chapter.